Okay, chapter 2, verse 19. Elena Patterson. We got caught eating while I called on her.
And the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven.
Okay, so after prayer, if we take what the Septuagint says, which adds supplication in addition to prayer, the God of heaven makes known to Daniel the prophet the dream and the interpretation during the night, i.e. on the bed watch. Here's it's not Babylonian, it's Egyptian, but maybe Daniel's bed probably looks something like that. So I don't want to hear any complaints about the mattresses in dorm number 8. Look at the mattress on that bed. Okay? Oftentimes, the mighty God of heaven reveals mysteries to his chosen servants at the night watch. The night watch, i.e. Genesis 15:2. After these things, the word of the Lord came unto Abram in a vision, saying, Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward. And Abram said, Lord God, what wilt thou give me, seeing I go childless? Etc. The night vision.
Does that not imply sleeping?
Well, that's a good question. In the Abraham account, he's awoken. Because it starts out, after these things, the word of the Lord came unto Abram in a vision, saying, but he takes him outside. Because he says, count the number of the stars, if you're able to number them, so it's like you're sleepy. So I would think he woke him up. I would think that we should take that counting the stars, like he really did. And not that he counted them, but that he woke him up and he went outside. And if you've ever been to Wadi Rum or somewhere like that in Jordan, or a Nahal or a Wadi in Israel at nighttime, and looked up, the stars are innumerable there. It's just amazing. It's just infinite. Also in Genesis 28:11, that's with Jacob. And then Acts 18:9 is another example of the God of heaven revealing his will or something magnificent to his servants in the night watch. Nevertheless, verse number 20, Mr. Skipper.
Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might.
Okay, so Baruch Adonai Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Baruch means blessed. And the use of the word, that's the Hebrew word here, Baruch, for blessed. It was, and still is, the traditional custom at the beginning of a Hebrew prayer. Daniel does it right here. Jews do it today when they have synagogue dinner. So that's a modern day example. With the prayers and the lighting of the candles, or you pray over the challah bread, or you're drinking the wine with Shabbat, all of those prayers begin with the same word that Daniel uses right here. Pretty neat, that custom, the deep-rooted ancient custom that existed this very day. Once again, Daniel dispels the notion that the center of all wisdom came from Marduk, right, the chief god of Babylon, but wisdom really comes from Jesus, from the God, the mighty God, the God of heaven. Verse 21, Zach.
And he changed the times and the seasons, and he removed kings and raised up kings.
So, in Daniel's exaltation of the mighty God of heaven, Daniel prescribes to him alone as being the force behind all of the geopolitical events in the world. See Job 12:22, Job 12:23. God, the mighty God, the God of heaven, he alone oversees, he alone administers the set time and duration of world empires. He knows what's going to happen 10 days from now. 10 days from now is, right? It's not 11. It's 10 days from now. He knows that there was a dozen commercial airline jets stolen from the Tripoli airport in Libya. What are they going to do with them? Well, we'll find out 10 days from now. Right? He's in control of all the geopolitical events in the world. Okay? That's the main point of the passage. Okay. Verse 22. Wesley, you got that one, man?
Yep. It is He who reveals the profound and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with it.
So maybe Daniel had Job memorized, and he's thinking of the same words of Job, basically, in Job 12:22. It's possible, very possible. Nevertheless, the idea, the notion that the God of heaven and not the astronomical cults of Babylon accurately perceive the future. Okay? God of heaven, mighty God, controls it, not these astronomical cults and the stars in the sky. This is a full frontal assault on the nuts and bolts upon the social fabric of the Babylonians' thought, practice, and throne room. Does that make sense? Now, by placing these contrasting concepts of darkness and light side by side with one another, Daniel is stating that the God of heaven is the creator of both light and darkness, i.e. Isaiah 45:7. By the way, in Isaiah 45:7, when it says that he is also the creator of evil in King James, that's not a good translation. In Isaiah 45:7, creator of evil. A better translation is the creator of calamities, i.e. Hurricane Katrina, i.e. etc. Okay, it's Isaiah 45:7. But he is the omniscient God who knows all and does all. In Scripture, darkness is often a metaphor for the mysterious. Exodus chapter 20, verse whatever it is, 18, I think. And Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. In the East, in the world of the Bible, in the pages of the Bible, more often than not, God is pictured in that package. And Moses drew near unto the thick darkness where God was. Psalm 97. The Lord reigneth, let the earth rejoice, let the multitudes of isles be glad thereof. Clouds and darkness are round about him. Corinthians, somewhere it's written the same thing.
We always think of it as dark, as evil, as
We do. Right. And it's the opposite. 1 Corinthians 4:5. That's what it is. Because the darkness hides his radiance, his glory, his beauty. But picturing him in that package, like they do there, they did then, he's not as approachable, is he? Because now we have boldness and access with confidence by the faith of him. Ephesians chapter 3. And having boldness and access with confidence is a lot different than that picture I just painted, right? Nevertheless, so metaphor sometimes is for darkness being mystery, and light is wisdom. Is often a metaphor for wisdom. In the 119th Psalm, in the verse 105. Okay. The object there is it's a device that astronomical cults of Babylon would use to discern the times, to predict eclipses, these kind of things, right? I mean, if you can predict an eclipse in that world, where you don't have NASA, which they could predict, you can rule people. Fear, mongering. You upset the gods, therefore 13 days from now there will be a total eclipse. And there is 13 days from now, oh boy. I mean, these people up there have some supernatural power they're thinking, because you would think that too, and so would I in that world. But, like I said, this is why it's such a full frontal assault on people's professions, on people's jobs, on people's thought, on people's practice. Kathy.
I thank thee and praise thee, O thou God of my fathers, who hast given me wisdom and might, and thou hast made known unto me now what we desired of thee. For thou hast now made known unto us the king's matter.
Okay. So the only other time in the scriptures that I can find where the term God of my fathers is used is in Acts 24:14, when Paul is giving defense before Felix the governor. Now, that term is loaded. It's pregnant with theological God of my fathers. Think about all the theology packed into that. Cultural. Think about how far back that concept goes. Historical. And geographical meaning. The God of my fathers, which that term would go all the way back at least to the patriarchs who Daniel's talking about, and even Adam, maybe. Okay?
I'm surprised to hear you say that that's the only time. It just seems like something you would hear.
24:14 in Acts is the only other one I can find. Yep. So by saying what he said, Daniel is very carefully identifying himself with the invisible God. The invisible God who dwells between the cherubim, the creator of heaven and earth. Yes, sir?
He used this term wisdom and might both times. What would be the might that Daniel would be using?
Well, that's a good question. I couldn't help but think of the parting of the Red Sea.
So he's talking about the history.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think by the way, just as a footnote, I think that's incorrect in one example, and here's why. What happens if you touch the ark? You die. Okay? In the Holy of Holies, is it light or dark in there? It's dark. It's pitch black dark. And if you touch that, you die. Correct? If you're a high priest and you're approaching that object, wouldn't you much prefer if the rods went that way instead of that way? Because if they went this way, then in the dark, you can carefully, right, feel the wood. You can grab the handle, right? And does that make sense? Right? And you know now that you're in the midst of it. And then from there, you can hold out with one hand, right? Sprinkle the blood, and then you walk up backwards. Like that. You never turn your back on God. Okay? Just like if you go to the Wailing Wall today at the hotel, they do the same thing after they're going to pray, right? Take at least 3 steps back, and then you can. Just an idea. So tell George Lucas next time you see him, then if they remake Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, they put the poles the other way. Anyways, I think I have too much time on my hands. I discuss these things with my friends. That's cool. My friend Randall Price brought that to my attention. He's right. He's right. Okay. At the end of the Thanksgiving, Daniel acknowledges that the petition came from who? His small prayer group. That's what it came from. By switching from first person singular to the first person plural. We. 2 or 3 were gathered together in his name that night. In hope and trust and faith, they prayed to the same God you prayed to. This makes you want to have a prayer group now, doesn't it? Like to take it more seriously. Praying to God in small groups. You know? So ends this declaration of blessing. Now, another object appropriated, this is a footnote, is the ark was appropriated from the Egyptians. Because what did we find in King Tut's tomb? An ark. See how similar that is? You have the ark of the Hebrews with the angels on top. You have the ark of King Tut with Anubis the god on top. Same thing. Top comes off just like that one comes off. Relics are put in there. right? Staff, manna, commandments, relics are put in there. Same thing. Same thing.
What do you make of that?
There's not a negative light to be shined on it. It's just that God's appropriating the culture and the mannerisms of where the people live, right? And what they're used to. That's all. It's like, Martin Luther's song, Mighty Fortress is Our God. Supposedly, from what I understand, that song was originally a famous bar song, a jukebox song. Something that you tuck and change for God's glory. Just like this. Right? Taking something everyone knows and sees all the time, right? Just making it for his glory.
It's interesting that the Ark of Egypt had the god Anubis, which is the god over the dead. And that was a big deal, where God then takes over the one of the dead, and life and death.
Very good. Good.
I mean, you picture that.
Yeah, that is in the Cairo Museum. Very good. If you ever go to Egypt, do not drink bottled soda. Okay? Because what they do is they take the empty glass bottles and the fellahim, the peasants, bring them home, and they fill the bathtub up with half bath water and half 2-liter soda water, 2-liter soda pop. And they mix it up and then they rebottle it in the home, and you will have it coming out of both ends for 10 days, I guarantee you. And also, we have to be very careful about drinking bottled water, because remember in Slumdog Millionaire, how they put a little bit of crazy glue on the cap? Right? You never eat anything in Egypt put underwater. So, all that being said, bring a lot of beef jerky with you when you go, and drink canned soda. Egypt. Verse 24. Verse 24. Zach.
Therefore Daniel went to Wright, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus to him, Do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Take me before the king. I will tell the king the interpretation. Immediately after the small prayer meeting ended, Daniel alone followed court etiquette, sought out Arioch, chief executioner. Daniel's petition was for this previously arranged instant and direct meeting with the king that had already been authorized by the king. Verse 25. Elena.
Then Arioch hurriedly brought Daniel into the king's presence and spoke to him as follows. I have found a man among the exiles in Judah who can make the interpretation known to the king.
Okay, so expediting Daniel to the throne room ASAP to save the necks of all of these guilds, Arioch conveniently, and good for him, he attaches himself, or he links himself to the fate of Daniel by taking recognition of discovering the dreamer, who's hopefully going to appease the wrath of the king. But at the same time, he's hedging his bets, because he distances himself a little bit from Daniel by downgrading Daniel's status in front of the king as a captive. Now the parallels between Joseph and Daniel continue. Genesis 41, 12 through 14. As the chief butler intermediated to also present the young Hebrew captive to the king. Verse 26. Verse 26. Mr. Skipper.
The king declared to Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, Are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation?
Okay, so since Daniel is no longer in his dorm room with his friends, And since he is now in the presence of the king in the royal courtroom, we need to be proper, of course. And therefore, the author reminds the reader that his Babylonian name is now employed. Okay? Belshazzar, whose name means something like the one whom Bel helps. Something like that. Bel being one of the chief deities of Babylon. And so the same structure, the same grammatical structure is used to start the dialogue between the king and Daniel, like what was used earlier between the king and the wise men. Same structure of the discourse between them. Okay. Verse 27. Verse 27. Liz.
Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, "The secret which the king has demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show unto the king."
Okay, so Daniel starts out his response to the king with an authoritative yet negative statement. It's the first thing out of his mouth. It's authoritative, but it's negative. And with command, Daniel, he lumps together all these different guilds of magi as being incapable, or there's no way that these guys can declare the mystery of the dream and the interpretation, king. Now, what you're looking at up here is an object that we think that some of the soothsayers would have used to determine the future. They would cut open, and this is written in Ezekiel, they would cut open an animal, take out its liver, and then discern from the liver the will of the king. This was Nebuchadnezzar used this when he needed to find out if he should turn left or right when he was invading Israel. Let's see who can find it first. Sorgio, ready? Go!
What are you looking for?
I have it. Go for it. Ezekiel 21:21. Now, how easy is that to remember now? 21:21. Well, the king of Babylon stood at the parting of the way, at the head of the two ways, to use divination. He made his arrows bright. He consulted with images. He looked in the liver. Okay? Take the liver out. Put it on there. Kind of like a Ouija board sort of thingy. And they told him to go left or right. He was at the parting of the waves. Elena, or Mr. Skipper, can you make it 2 degrees colder in here, please? Thanks. Okay. But Daniel is also, in verse 27, he's also possibly affiliating himself with this group of wise men to soon prove that the skill to declare the dream and the interpretation did not come from himself, but from the God of heaven. Verse 28. Elena.
However, there is a God of heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will take place in the latter days. This was your dream and the visions in your mind while on your bed.
So Daniel immediately agrees with the wise men right off the bat. Starts with the negative, now he's got positive. That the secret can only be revealed by those whose dwelling is not with flesh. So our first clue as to the content of the dream, right? Because we have no idea what it's about. We've been in the dark so far. It reveals to the king and the reader that the dream and the interpretation are eschatological in nature. Ominous. Ominous. Genesis 41:16. Daniel, like Joseph, both begin their discourses by acknowledging the God of their fathers. verse 29. Verse 29. What's it?
As for you, O king, while on your bed, your thoughts turn to what will take place in the future. He who reveals mysteries has made known to you what will take place.
Okay, so Daniel, like Joseph, Genesis chapter 40, verse 8, confirms that a correct interpretation of the dream only belongs to God. Now, we're going to see in these upcoming phrases these terms as for thee and as for me, and between Daniel and the king. These are bridges that are linking the knowledge of the end times and the dream from the two gentlemen. Okay? As for thee, as for me. Okay? Verse 30. Kathy.
3, but as for me, the secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living, but for their sakes that shall make known to the interpretation to the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of thy heart.
Superb. While concluding his preface, he's finishing up his opening statement. He begins to declare the content and the interpretation of the dream. Daniel informs us that the dream, why did this dream come? It came as an answer to the king's desire to know the course and end of world powers in the future. He wanted to know the course of world history. We do not receive because we do not ask. Nebuchadnezzar asked. At least in this instance, he received. Verse 31. Verse 31. Brown, got that one, please?
Thou came stars, and behold a great image. This great image was brightness, was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible.
Okay, so the first image that the king was given in his night dream was of a singular, massive, monolithic, dreadful statue. Or an idol, if you will. Which emphasizes probably its unity. We don't know much about it yet, but all we know about it so far is that it's one. It's echad, unified. Okay. Verses 32 and 33. 32 and 33. Zach?
This image's head was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay.
Okay. The image's monetary value, its worth, is compared to the precious metals and alloys of that time. Now what we see here is as we decrease, now we have no idea yet what the gold is, what the silver is, we don't know anything, right? We just know that when we decrease from top to bottom of the statue, that whatever stage we're moving to next is worth less. Silver is worth less than gold. Bronze is worth less than silver, etc. But the image's metals, or their alloys, increase in strength from top to bottom. That is to say, silver is stronger than gold. Bronze is stronger than silver. Maybe it's talking about their military might. The kingdom of the belly, their military might will be stronger and more vicious than the silver. Okay, we don't want to show our hand yet, who's who. Right? We want the text to help us out a little bit. Okay? But we'll get there. Verse 34. 34. Jane?
While we were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron in clay and smashed them.
So the emphasis given in this verse is that the stone, the rock, is it a headstone of the corner? I don't know. Okay. It's not a product of man-made creation, but it's supernatural in its origin. It's supernatural in its nature. And it's supernatural in its cataclysmic mission. How do we know that its origin and its nature and its mission are supernatural? Because the stone was cut out without hands. Interestingly enough, the good old Septuagint adds the phrase, cut out without hands from a mountain, which just fits the whole dream sequence. Much nicer to have that from the mountain. Because if that is there, then that correlates, we'll see later from verse 45, which in verse 45 it ties the stone's origin or source to a mountain. Okay? So if it was a mountain, at least here in 34, and when you know where this is going. You know where it came from, because when you see mountain of God, you think of Jerusalem, heaven, whatever. Okay? And because throughout the scriptures, the Lord God's presence or abode is on a mountain, i.e. the Mount of Transfiguration, i.e. Mount Zion. If you are a Canaanite, Baal lives on Mount Hermon. If you are the Apostle Paul, Jesus confronts you at the main route next to Mount Hermon, Mount Carmel, Baal. You see how, right? It's the high place. That's why those weirdos, right, in Mount Shasta, right, pray to Mount Shasta and crystals and all these kind of goofy things. Okay, because it's the high place. It's the mountain. Okay? Exodus 20, 10 Commandments, etc. Verse 35. Verse 35. Liz?
Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth.
Good. So since the image, or the idol, whatever word you want to use, since it's interconnected, the gold, the silver, the bronze, etc., since they're connected with one another, when they're destroyed, upon the stone's impact, we have the reverse order here. We have the reverse order. The manner in which the author is describing the destruction of the image and its scattering is loaded with agricultural and textual history. Let me explain a little bit. One of the two staples of the ancient Israeli economy was that of the farmer. And according to the scriptures in Genesis 4:2, the two oldest occupations were shepherd and farmer. And Cain brought to the fruit of the ground and offered unto the Lord. And Abel, he also brought to the firstling of the flock, shepherd farmer. Okay. Now, after the reaper, and the reason we're bringing this up is because the destruction of this statue and scattering is couched in agricultural, i.e., the pictures will help us, terms. So after the reaper thrust with his sickle, gathered the wheat and the barley, they would bring them into the threshing floor, which you can see right here. Once it was brought into the threshing floor, the separating of the grain from the chaff would begin. So a beast of burden, as you can see there, would have tied to it a threshing sled, just think of some kind of sled, and then at the bottom of the sled, there would be sharp, preferably basalt stones stuck into the bottom of the sled, so that when the animal was going around in circles, we would put a little kid or a lady or someone on the back of the sled to put pressure on it that would grind down. And then there's another shower. Then what you would do is you would carefully, very carefully separate the good from the wicked by tossing both in the air, and the wind would come and take the chaff away, the worthless, weightless chaff, while the precious seed, which is weightier, falls right to the ground. And of course, oftentimes in Scripture, this is associated with God's judgment. God's speaking to the people in language he understands, i.e. Job 21:8, Revelation 14, Isaiah 17:3, Psalm 1:4. So the stone is being divine in its source. And its mission is not only to destroy the image, whatever the image is representative of, but to replace that image and its function by establishing a kingdom of its own. It's removing and replacing the image, the idol. Yeah?
Could you please go back to the comment about increasing in strength as you go down? What about the feet? Clay and iron, is that somehow more? I've always thought of that as fragile. Is that
We'll get there.
stronger?
If you can hold that thought, because I have a picture that will speak to that exactly. Verse 36, Gabi.
This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king.
Okay, so just quite simply, this ends the content of the dream revealed by the God of heaven to Daniel, and the commencement of the interpretation, the beginning of the interpretation to the king. Verse 37, Zach.
You, O king, are a king of kings. For the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory.
Just as we earlier saw, O king, live forever. The term king of kings was a common expression of respect towards ancient Near Eastern kings. Ezra 7:12, Ezekiel 26:70, and of course this title is later used by Christians in expressing their reverence to their king in Revelation chapter 19, or yes, I can memorize, chapter 19, verse whatever, when it says, and he had on his robe and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Daniel informs the king that the source of his authority and the source of his dominion, Nebuchadnezzar's dominion, Nebuchadnezzar's authority, this comes from an otherwise unknown God, the God of heaven. Verse 38. Verse 38. Wesley, got that, please?
And wherever the sons of men dwell, or beasts of the field, or birds of the sky, he has given them to your hand, and has caused you to rule over them all. You are the head gold.
Okay. The author continues to inform the king that the God of heaven has bestowed upon him, upon Nebuchadnezzar, all of creation. All of creation is under the authority of the king, and if that wasn't enough, the Septuagint adds, and the fish of the sea. And the fish of the sea. And the fish of the sea. Just to fill it out a little bit more. in order to fill out his authority, his rule he has over all of creation. Of course, this package, this idea should remind us of Genesis 1:26. When he says, how does it go? I have it memorized, but I can't think of it right now. How does it go? And God said, let the earth bring forth a living creature after his kind, cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth after their kind. And God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, and cattle after their kind, every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth after their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. Genesis 1, maybe 26, verse 26. Nebuchadnezzar is ruling and functioning like Adam, almost, as it were. He's king of the earth. And of course, this now includes Jerusalem. Nebuchadnezzar is the first of 4 empires to dominate the city of the great king, i.e. Jerusalem. Now, the king was probably ignorant that this declaration that Daniel just made was indeed the fulfillment of prophecy by Jeremiah in 27 verses 6 and 7. Nevertheless, the captive reader were finally informed that King Nebuchadnezzar and the remaining, not just Nebuchadnezzar, but the remaining Gentile Neo-Babylonian Empire, 605 BC to 539 BC, are indeed represented in the image as the head of gold. He says at the end of verse 38, you are this head of gold, i.e. your empire. That's like a test question, guys. One of the test questions, which we'll go over before the test, so don't sweat it. But when did this empire reign from? When did that empire reign from? When did it, etc. Okay? So you're talking approximately 605 to 539. The head of gold, as you can see represented here. Verse 39. Liz.
And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth.
So the second kingdom is immediately represented by Daniel as being inferior to Nebuchadnezzar or Babylon's empire in worth. That is to say, in their form of government. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar, at a whim, could make a decree, could rule with authority, whereas the Medes and the Persians kind of had their hands tied a little bit, right? Cannot change the decree of the law of the Medes and Persians, etc., in their form of government. But as previously mentioned, they are stronger in their military might. The Medes and the Persians are, that is. We also see that the second kingdom is separated, isn't it? It's separated from the head into 2 distinct members, which most would agree that history shows to be the Medes and the Persians, i.e. 539 BC to 331 BC. Approximately. Now, the third kingdom is characterized as inferior in worth to the first and the second kingdoms, but is stronger in force. Once we get to chapter 7, guys, we'll be able to unpack this a little bit more. Because in this chapter, these kingdoms are seen from a divine perspective, precious metals. Whereas in chapter 7, these kingdoms are seen from man's perspective, ravenous, wild, horrid beasts. Okay? History has shown that third to be the Greek Empire. 331 to 146 BC. Yes?
Do you have the date for the Medes and Persians?
The Medes and Persians was 539 to 331. Verse 40. Verse 40. Zach.
And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all others.
So the fourth kingdom is, without delay, it's characterized as destructive. That is its hallmark. It is destructive in its nature. It's strong, and it is fierce in its military might. On the other hand, the form of their government, being symbolized as iron, is a far cry from the preciousness of the empire of gold. Most would understand that history has shown this to be the Roman Empire. 146 BC to 395 AD. Pause for a second. Like the previous Medo-Persian Empire, which consisted of two entities, the two arms. So this portion of the image also stands in two. In this case, two legs. We could think of this as being the second wind of the Roman Empire, 395 AD to 1453 AD. Now,
Please repeat that. 395.
to 1453, after the death of the Emperor Theodosius in 395, the empire split in two. The West ruled from Rome, the East ruled from Turkey, from Constantinople. The Western Empire soon dissolved, while the Eastern Empire maintained itself in some form for another 1,000 years. And we're still, to this day, very, very Roman in our empire, in our thought, in our practice. Our calendar, July, Julius. August, Augustus. October, Octavian. I mean, we're Roman to the core in many, many, many of our ways. Verse 41, Zach.
Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay, partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. Yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay.
Good. So in outgrowth, a kingdom comes out of the fourth and final kingdom. We know the first kingdom, the second kingdom, and the third kingdom, and the fourth kingdom are history. On September 1st, 2014. Those are past history. But a kingdom grows out as an outgrowth of the fourth and final kingdom, and it is described as politically and militarily weaker than all other kingdoms previously mentioned. And not only that, it's divided. And it's divided into 10 toes, which are here mentioned for the first time. This is the first bit of data or news about this we've heard in the whole chapter so far. Now, the thread of 10 kings ruling under the umbrella, 10 kings ruling under the umbrella of Gentile rule or power is a prominent theme in New Testament eschatology. Revelation 13:1. I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. 10 power sources. Revelation 17:12. The 10 horns which you saw, these are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet. Okay? No kingdom as yet. These 10 power sources. And then, in the 17th chapter of Revelation, of course, the woman, which we're not going to go into who that is right now. That's too nice, woman. She's a harlot. She rides with, controls, is part and parcel of these 10 horns. Okay? Yes, question?
What was the first revelation?
13:1. I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Revelation 17:12. The 10 horns are 10 kings. It interprets it for you if you just give it time and don't jump the gun. Most of the time it does. Sometimes it doesn't. 42. Wesley.
As the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of pottery, so some of the kingdom will be strong and part of it will be brittle.
Okay. In the mindset, in the world of the ancient Near East, where everything was made out of pottery, clay would have symbolized fragility and great weakness. Job 4:19. Job 13:12. Psalm 2:9. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Therefore, the author is striving to make the point that even though there is a residue, iron, there's a residue of the old Roman Empire and this future final stage of the time of the Gentiles, the final empire will be divided into 10 kings and is feeble compared to the previous Roman Empire it grew out of. Now, a bunch of people got all excited at one point in time when the European Union had 10 nations in it. You know, and Jack Van Impe's telephone was ringing off the hook. Well, lo and behold, they have what today? 13 or 17 or something like that. You know, it's just chill out, guys. Okay? You know? It doesn't mean we shouldn't be looking, right? And sober and alert and aware of the world that we live in and the circumstances. Jeremiah, Isaiah, all these guys, they're great political commentators. They know what's going on in the news. Okay? Just watching. Verse 43. Zach.
As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay.
The final stage, guys, the final, which you may be living in, maybe. The final stage of Gentile world power before the stone comes and smite the image, it is characterized by its lack of cohesion. As this final world empire unsuccessfully attempts in uniting itself with the nations of the world. So much for a one world government.
It's not going to happen.
Okay? It unsuccessfully attempts in uniting itself with the nations of the world. They shall not cleave one to another. Period. The final form of Gentile government is so opposed, directly opposed to to the first form of Gentile government, which was considered pristine and its gold standard form of government. The gold standard form of government is, believe it or not, a dictatorship. And if you're of the eschatological viewpoint that Jesus physically and literally comes down, which that's why you go to school here, probably, right? He rules and reigns under, for a lack of a better term, a dictatorship. Okay? But that's a different class. Verse 44.
But he rules from self-sacrificial love.
Absolutely.
He doesn't rule over, he rules under. He lifts and sustains, and he doesn't make you less of an individual, he makes you more of an individual. He's your creator. He's the antithesis of a world dictator.
Exactly. Yes.
But you are a slave to him.
You are about to servant.
You are Judas.
Yes, you are. 44. Liz.
And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever.
So during the diluted or during the weakened form of the Roman government, which is characterized by the rule of 10 toes or 10 kings, right? Who will give their power and authority to the beast. It says in Revelation 17. The God of heaven will send the stone which the builders refused to annihilate the time of Gentile rule over Jerusalem, over the earth, and to establish that's the stone's mountain, or the stone's theocratic form of government on earth permanently, and it shall stand forever. Now, isn't that a nice picture? It's a picture of Jerusalem. Okay. Where many hold that Jesus comes back to rule and reign from in bodily form. I.e., the stone. The stone which the builders refused.
Can you orient me there?
I can't orient you.
I'm trying to
This is where I would go on walks with my wife. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. You see the buildings on the horizon line right here? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. That's King David's Hotel or whatever. The buildings on the horizon line are the Watershed Ridge, which is the Patriarchal Highway, which is the back north-south Highway 5 of the country. That's the route Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob would have taken to go from Shechem down to Beersheba. Just take away the hotels for $800 a night, and you just walk right there. What you're looking at, the stone walls of the city, are Ottoman period, built by Suleiman, which is the Arabic version of Solomon. He liked himself so much, he called himself Suleiman the Magnificent. And they're built about maybe 1550, somewhere around there. I tried to count every single stone on the wall on the west side here, which I did. But people started looking at me like I was crazy in my hackle hair because I'm doing this. So I had never a girlfriend or anything to do. So, why not? What you're looking at here is just like looking under the spaghetti bowl. It's just all of these different It doesn't go to the Chalcolithic period, but it goes to like probably Iron Age, maybe are visible there, down to Medo-Persian, Greek, Roman, Byzantine, Islamic, Crusader, all of that. It's just all mixed up right in this area. And this is a great place to go. This the City of David Museum. It's a fantastic. I would go here first if you ever go here on your own. Just kind of orients you, right? It's a walk from A to Z, a chronological walk on the history of Jerusalem. And then Bethlehem's right here. It's about 2 miles away or so, something like that. The Arabs would say it's about 7 cigarettes away. That's how they measure time. The Arabs do. How many cigarettes it takes to get from point A to point B. Whatever. Okay. So, and then Jaffa Gate would just be right over there. So that's the west side. Looking down, right there is the Valley of the Sons of Hinnom, the Valley of Gehenna. Okay. So over that, right there, that watershed range, that right there is Judah. Then the Valley of Gehenna separates. This is Benjamin. Okay. You get hired to take you to Victoria. I have to bring my wife too and my 2 daughters. So, yeah. Okay. Almost done, guys. Verse 45. Verse 45.
King David's Hotel.
Yeah.
Coffee and ice cream, $20 at lunchtime.
Oh, but it was worth it.
It was worth it.
You're there.
It was worth it.
It's totally worth it.
That's right. Sorry.
That's okay. I wish I could have had coffee and ice cream there. Verse 45. Zach.
Inasmuch as he saw the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and it is interpretation is true.
So as Daniel finishes the interpretation of the dream, he summarizes it up again real quick to the dream, or to the king. He reminds the king which deity, albeit unknown to the king probably up until this point, even though I'm sure he wasn't aware of the God of Israel when he invaded, starting in 605, I'm sure, but personally, he's albeit likely unknown, this God, who revealed the dream to him, the God of heaven, the God of the Jews. Daniel also reminds the king that the dream is established, that this is valid, and that the dream from the great God is, we have the word Aman here, the Aramaic word Aman, which is the Hebrew Amen, which is trustworthy. It means trustworthy. That is a trustworthy statement. Daniel begins and ends his discourse before the king by honoring the God of his fathers. He gives God the glory. He's gifted. He can do things no one else can do. And he hears it, but he reflects it and gives glory to God. Verse 46, Elena Patterson.
Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face and did homage to Daniel and gave orders to present to him an offering and fragrant incense.
Okay, so Daniel finishes speaking. Immediately the king arose from his throne, covered his face in the earth, to publicly display his veneration, his respect, his admiration to the God of heaven, and to the prophet Daniel. Even though the dream contains the termination of his government, he still does what he does. Then the king commands his officers to take up an offering. He bestows a grain offering and an incense offering upon Daniel so that Daniel may present them to his God for an offering. That's probably what's going on. Okay, but here you go, Daniel. Here's a grain offering. Here's an incense offering. Now go worship, offer them to your God.
So the implication here where it says in mind and worship Daniel, he was really worshiping Daniel honors God.
Right. Verse 47. Liz.
The king answered unto Daniel and said, Of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods, and a Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal this secret.
So the final words of Nebuchadnezzar in the royal throne room scene are words of praise and admiration to glorify Daniel's God, to recognize him as the supreme deity. He's going to remain a polytheist. Okay? He still likes other gods. Okay? But he recognizes him as the supreme deity in the heavens above, i.e. the God of gods, and also the supreme deity over the kings of the earth, i.e. the Lord of kings. He's the God of heaven above, and he's the God of earth beneath. Verse 48, Wesley.
Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many great gifts. He made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon.
So, if we continue the parallels between Daniel and Joseph, Genesis 41, 40 through 44. The author gives special attention to the material gifts bestowed upon the prophet Daniel by the Gentile king upon the interpretation of the dream, just like Genesis 41, 40 through 44. Such physical gifts would have now probably made Daniel, just out of school, a very, very well-to-do young man. But the designation of his new high positions within the social fabric, the daily life of Babylonia, would now give him even, just as importantly, tremendous sway in the palace intrigue, the inner workings of the kingdom. Daniel's first newly appointed position consisted of having dominion over this imperial province, which you can see on the map behind me, and the capital city of its empire. This is the region now Daniel rules.
In red or blue?
It's Babylon. Yeah, right in there.
Yeah, red line.
Right in there. The blue lines are Tigris and Euphrates River. The red lines are main routes. Like highway fives. His second position, right, because he's ruler over the whole province and chief of the governors, his second position made him prefect or president over all of the guilds, over all of the previously mentioned Babylonian magi. And since he's the president over all of the magi, I'm sure this included certain religious freedoms for himself and his friends. And finally, verse 49. Verse 49. Mr. Skipper, finish us off.
Daniel made a request to the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained at the king's court.
Seizing the moment, which is what we ought to do when moments arise, Daniel probably reminded the king that he was not alone in the process of petitioning the God of heaven to declare the dream and interpretation, so therefore the king should, while you're at it, bestow upon those who assisted me, i.e. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Nebuchadnezzar grants Daniel's requests, promotes the three young men as administrators under the authority of Daniel. Yet, the king persists on highlighting, which he should, the superiority of Daniel as a wise man. And therefore, he gives him public honor by positioning him in the highest level of cabinet rank. He is seated in the gate of the city as the eyes and the ears of Nebuchadnezzar. What we're looking at is the gate at Nebuchadnezzar. Of course, it's on a much smaller scale than the gates of the city of Babylon. This is the valley of Ayalon, where the sun stood still and the moon stayed until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. That is the high hill country of Judah, Ephraim, etc. This would have been a six-chambered gate from the Solomonic era. And you could just use your sanctified imagination, dress up the gate. You could just see Daniel sitting in one of those six chambers, dispensing wisdom, counsel, judgment, with the eyes and ears of Babylon.